Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Shark Talk, where I chat with much-loved TV presenter, naturalist and all-round adventurer Steve Backshall, MBE. Now Steve is a shark expert and he's going to be sharing with us some of his personal shark anecdotes, as well as telling us about some of the species that can be found in British waters and what we can all do to better protect them. So let's find out here on Shark Talk. Steve, welcome to Shark Talk. I am really looking forward to talking to you all about sharks, of course, but also to hear about the many adventures and experiences that you've had, or even just a few of them. I know there's so many. So thank you for coming on the show.
You're very, very welcome. As it happens, I'm in quarantine right now after my last expedition, so I have to spend 2 weeks at home. So the timing is absolutely perfect.
And of course you are. Of course you're fresh back from an expedition. It makes absolute sense. I think the best place to start, actually, in my first question is, why sharks? I mean, you've hosted countless wildlife programmes and met all sorts of weird and wonderful creatures. You've even discovered some new species as well. So what is it about sharks that's earned them a special place in your heart?
I think they have a special place in many people's hearts. In fact, something that I've noticed from making programs for the last 20 years in natural history is that sharks appeal to people who don't even necessarily realise that they're interested in wildlife. Sharks appeal to people who have no interest in conservation or would never watch a program about blue tits and goldfinches. But that universal primal fear that sharks appear to instill in many of us, whether that has been stoked by the media or not, it's something that I think hooks into an awful lot of people, and it certainly hooked into me when I was a kid, when I had my very first encounter. But the longer that I spent studying them, being around them, working with them, the more I found their story one of constant surprise, constant revelation, and the more I learned that this complex group of animals, which date back before most of the animals we consider to be primitive and ancient, had so much to offer in terms of its biology. I felt like I could carry on studying sharks for 1,000 lifetimes and learn something new every single day. So to begin with, I think I was probably hooked in by the things that hook in so many people. You know, the big teeth, the fear of the unknown, the fear of dark seas and big animals that can take chunks out of you. And then the longer I spent studying them, the more it became about these super sensitive creatures that have powers beyond our understanding, that have been around since long before the dinosaurs and may not be here that much longer if we don't pay considerable heed.
This fear that you're talking about, as you say, it kind of plays both ways, doesn't it? Because it's that fear that gets so many people initially interested in sharks, and then you can convert that interest into a passion and advocate for sharks as you do. And for some, that fear obviously goes against them. I think we're slightly getting over that sort of misrepresentation slowly now, but it is interesting, isn't it, that it's kind of a double-edged sword.
I would love to. I'd love to be able to agree with you on that. We made a series 2 years ago now. Was it last year even? Blue Planet Live.
Yes.
My segments were all about sharks and shark conservation, and it was to a BBC One audience, so prime time. So not really pitching to us, not pitching to my peers and people who are already interested in biology, and the people that I see around me all the time who, as you say, are already converted. We were speaking to an audience that otherwise would have been watching EastEnders. And the overwhelming thing that we got back from that programme, more than any of the intricate details about food webs or shark conservation, the overwhelming thing that came back was, I didn't know you can get in the water with a shark and not get eaten. And I thought that, like you, I thought we were way past that. I thought that, you know, that time was gone and past. It is not.
Wow.
The vast majority of people in this country, and certainly around the world, sharks are an animal that you get in the water alongside them and you get eaten, full stop. Most people know nothing of the challenges facing sharks. They have no idea that there are well over 400 different species and half of them would fit in your pocket and, you know, are no possible threat to us as human beings. Actually, public awareness of what sharks are is still just as backward as it was when Jaws first hit our screens.
That is so interesting. And you know what? That kind of suggests that I've been living in a little bit of an echo chamber, which is easy to do in social media, isn't it?
And it's not just social media. The people that you work with and you surround yourself with. I know that you're wearing the Bite Back T-shirt right now.
Representing.
Yeah, absolutely representing. My friends, like your friends, want to go and dive with sharks. That is their idea of a great weekend. And actually, that is not the way that most people think about sharks around the world. And I think that's that is a really important thing to know. It was a massive surprise to all of us, and we were certainly intending on that series on really getting way below the surface on the many elements that are facing sharks around the world. Not just the obvious topics of finning, but getting into cosmetics and bycatch and into hidden shark products that we may never know about. But it became very obvious from program one that people weren't going to engage on that kind of level. Actually, all we needed to do was say, look, sharks are actually lovely, and they're not necessarily going to bite you, and that was enough. And actually, that was the take-home message for the vast majority of people that watched that series. Now, obviously, in the media, we are always picking and choosing our audiences and picking our message to connect to a specific audience in a specific way. So, that's not always going to be the way that I will make my programs about sharks. And I so hope that I get the opportunity to tell that far more complex and very important message. But I think that I find myself saying the same things on screen about sharks over and over again, quoting the same statistics and coming up with the same personal history to show why I love and don't fear these animals. And I thought I was done with that 10 years ago, but we're not.
That is such an incredible insight, because I agree. You hear so many people, we're all singing from this hymn sheet and you just think it's getting out there. But as you say, it's clearly, we've got more work to do. We really have. And, I'll take that message from you as a bit of extra motivation, actually, because sometimes you do sort of think, okay, the tide is turning. Where else should we focus, our messaging? But to know that is very important. And actually, just quickly, before I move on to the next question, saying that we've got more work to do, you've got a series coming out, haven't you, on Sky Nature, I think it is.
My goodness, you're well prepared.
Of course. I will do my homework.
Yes, I absolutely have. Yeah. So as soon as my quarantine is finished from the last expedition I've just got back from, I'm heading out to. Not trying to make anyone jealous or anything while everyone's sat at home on lockdown, but we're going out to Cocos and we're going to have 3 weeks on a shark science vessel there, filming for this new series, as you say. And this series, the drive of this series, is to try and provide the complete picture. So it is about sharks from prehistory to now to their future, to all of the challenges that face them right now, to every element of their biology. And we have that time on screen to be able to contemplate some of those things in a bit more breadth. Just backtracking a little bit to what you were just saying before, I think that we in the media have a really important part to play in this area of conservation. The simple messaging that is required to speak to a lot of people and have an impact is very difficult on a lot of elements of modern conservation. With sharks, it isn't. It's a simple sell. It's a simple story. And those are the tales that work best in the media. And I really think that we have a potential to make a difference. It's been very clear that particularly in Indochina and in China, that simply getting on side some big name celebrities to say, hang on a second, it's not cool to have shark fin soup sold at your weddings, had massive impact, absolutely massive impact. And I think that we have the ability, through the fact that it is a relatively simple message, to really have an impact on this problem and to do something tangible and substantial.
Yes, that's a very good point. And actually, I will be going on to talk specifically with you about shark conservation and what we can do and what is currently happening. And we will move on to that very shortly. But first, just to go back to your personal experiences with sharks, I want to talk about memorable moments. Now, I'm sure you've had many, but if you can pinpoint maybe a couple that rank us up there in your most memorable sharky moments.
Well, the most memorable would have to be the first. I was, I think, about 10 or 11 years old. I was on holiday with my folks in a nice, sunny, exotic part of the world, out snorkeling, when I saw my first shark, and I saw this classic silhouette approaching me out of the blue, and I can remember this sense of overwhelming excitement. I was shaking with energy and adrenaline that I'd seen this first shark. And then I realised that it wasn't going anywhere, and far from me having to swim after it, it was going around and around and around me in ever decreasing circles. And I did what any hardcore young naturalist would do. I completely lost it. I panicked. I climbed up onto a rock, and I sat there until weapons-grade sunburn forced me back into the water. I have never swum faster in my entire life than I did getting back to the shore. And that was such a pivotal moment in my experience with sharks. The intriguing thing is that I know that was a black tip reef shark, not a black tip, but a black tip reef shark. It was probably about that big. It was about as likely to do me any harm as your average halibut. But my perception was such that it just led to this pure, unbridled terror. But those fears, though they may be nearly universal, they're not always rational. They're not always real. So that would be my number one. I guess building up to, you can't not talk about the first time you dive outside of the cage with a great white shark.
Yes.
It is the greatest animal encounter on the planet, and although now there are very, very few places left where you can do it for good reason, that would always be, I think, my most favourite animal encounter of any kind. Guadalupe is a very, very special place. It's special not just for the great whites, but for the other animals that are there as well, the Guadalupe fur seals, the elephant seals, the extraordinary bird life. Being able to swim in blue water alongside the most iconic predator on the planet, having them swim straight towards you and then swim around you in a detour to get to the food that's behind you because they are not interested in you at all. That is definitely way, way up there. And then I think probably the most surprising of all shark encounters that I've had, which was with one particular blue shark off the coast of San Diego in California. And this one shark, more than any other individual that I've ever had an encounter with, was absolutely focused on me as you would expect a puppy to be. And it was so driven by the search for physical stimulus that it was swimming past little bits of bait in the water, completely ignoring them, to come up to me and stick its snout into my hand and just nuzzle away, the eyes rolling back, this absolute, you could see this absolutely overwhelming sense of well-being overcoming this shark before it slipped into tonic and just kind of like pretty much rolled over onto its back with its paws in the air going, oh God, do that again. I know, it's not a pause, by the way. And it was interesting because that day we must have encountered 20 individual blue sharks, about 5 or 6 makos, but that one single individual shark behaved differently to all the others. And it's something that I've seen in a lot of different places around the world. It's so tempting to think of them as just a fish until you meet one that has a different personality to all the others around it, and all of a sudden you're like, it's a real living, some might even say sentient being. And that is a transformative moment.
And I'm glad that you've mentioned the blue shark because I love all sharks, but blue sharks are something special. They really are. And a great first shark for people to have an interaction with, a respectful interaction, to see that side of sharks, the curious puppy-like sort of nature that they have. So, yes, you've mentioned many places that you've been to dive with sharks, but I think you'll agree with me that there is no place like home, because no matter what you see, the fact that it's in your home waters makes it that bit more special, doesn't it? And it'd be great to hear a little bit about that from you and about some of the sharks that live here as well.
Absolutely. Well, we have about 21 different species here, if you don't consider deep water species, which, North Atlantic species, you've got everything down to gulper sharks and goblin sharks and bramble sharks and all of possibly even Greenland sharks living in deep seas off British waters. And then this great abundance of cat sharks, horn sharks, smoothhound, taupe, porbeagle, mako, thresher, and blues, But the one which will always stand out, and the one which I think conclusively proves to anyone who ever says that British wildlife is underwhelming, is the basking shark.
Mm.
There's nothing in terms of wildlife encounters here in this country that matches that moment when you see that great white cavernous maw with the giant expanding gills and gill rakers coming towards you. It is like some bizarre Leviathan alien spaceship coming through the soupy plankton. And, we're supposed to be a country that is denuded of wildlife, a country that has so little to inspire people in terms of wild animals. Well, take anyone, and I mean anyone, out to see a basking shark and they'll be transformed. It is something seriously special. And, one of the other interesting things is how little we know about them.
Mm.
They're here in our seas, and yet we know comparatively little about where they go the rest of the year. It used to be believed that they hibernate. We don't even really know that they don't. We guess they go down into deep waters for the majority of the year, but we can't say for 100% sure that's true. Isn't that fascinating that this massive fish, second biggest fish in the sea, is found in our waters, and we still know next to nothing about how they mate, about their gestation. We guess it's going to be very long, but who knows how long? It's that to me is just remarkable.
Incredible animals. So yes, plenty of sharks in our waters, and plenty of reason to get involved in conserving them and working to help protect them. You work alongside several different charities, and you're a patron, as we've said, for Bite Back. And by the way, we are matching, Steve and I, today. It wasn't planned, but we are both representing Bite Back today. And they do some incredible work, don't they, for shark and marine conservation?
Graham Buckington, who set up Bite Back in his bedroom. He was a successful person, working, earning a good salary, and he just went, do you know what? I need to do something to change the way sharks are treated around the world, and set up Bite Back in his bedroom. And he is one of the most driven, ambitious people that I know when it comes to conservation. And he has done and achieved so much, driven so many campaigns forward, many of which could yet come to fruition. As you say, I'm also involved with Shark Trust, Manta Trust, and I think that the work that we do here in this country is vital, because it is so tempting to write off everything to do with shark conservation as being someone else's problem. It's so easy to paint it as being a problem that only affects the Far East, and that's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. The European fishing fleet is taking the majority of sharks in the North Atlantic, and certainly an awful lot of the sharks that are ending up in those huge fish markets in Taiwan and in Tsukuji and Tokyo are coming from Portuguese, Spanish, and yes, indeed us fishermen. And I, as I'm sure you have stood on many a dock here in this country and seen crates and crates and crates of taupe and smoothhound and other cat sharks that are just there, probably going to end up in fish and chip shops labeled as something else. We still have products containing shark cartilage and squalene on our shelves in our shops here in this country, and we still have plenty of restaurants that still sell shark fin soup. And then the major concern that we have at the moment, that we're trying to drive forward this campaign that Graham's been working on since 2015, is the fact that you can import 20 kilos of shark fin into this country with no problem whatsoever. You can't bring in dried seahorses or dolphin meat, but you can bring in 20 kilos of shark fin, which could raise maybe £4,000. Doesn't make any sense. It's one of those things that is driving or continuing to allow this ludicrous trade to continue. So we need powerful advocates on our side. I've had the pleasure of talking to George Eustace when he was at Fisheries about this, to Michael Gove when he was Secretary of State for the Environment on this topic. I believe that you're hoping to speak to Zach Goldsmith about it in person as well. What we need is someone who's prepared to put this forward as a bill, get it up in Parliament, and just get it changed. Let's get it done.
So there was a petition circulating that has got over 100,000 signatures. So that means that it can be potentially discussed, debated in Parliament. So it's one step closer, but we're not there yet. It needs to get over the line. And I want to know, from you, Steve, what do you want to say to the government about this particular issue? Why is it so important that we address this 20 kilogram personal allowance of shark fin being brought into the UK?
Why this is important is because it is one of the most wasteful forms of fishing in the world. It is for a small luxury item driving the complete extinction of one of the oldest and potentially most important groups of animals in our seas. And it doesn't actually connect or make sense to any of the other import duties that we have on other comparable products. There is no reason for us to have this loophole for shark fin coming into the UK. You could be talking about a dozen animals or more, fully mature adult animals, killed solely for their fins to make soup. And that doesn't make sense, and we should be speaking out against it. The other element to throw in there, of course, is that once a fin is dried and treated, it's very difficult for anyone, even an expert, to tell whether it's a fin from a critically endangered great hammerhead or from a comparatively common species. And you can't be expecting a border guard with no knowledge. I mean, I couldn't do it, and I study sharks for a living. You can't expect a border guard with no knowledge to be able to say, hang on, that fin there is from a CITES protected specimen. These ones are all right, but therefore that loophole needs to be shut.
And we have a golden opportunity to do that now. Many watching will probably have signed that petition themselves, but as we've already said, that's not the end of the road. There's more that people can do. There's ways that you can utilise your own skills and strengths. So what would you say to viewers and people watching?
So I would say become an advocate. Get out and go and dive with sharks. Go out and find out as much about them as you possibly can, and try and sway the opinions of those around you. We have the opportunity through social media and through streaming services and YouTube of telling our stories now to people all over the world. Tell as many of them as you can that sharks are awesome. Talk to them about glow-in-the-dark swell sharks and epaulet sharks that wander across the reefs through open air. Tell them about the tasseled wobbegong and the Greenland shark that lives to be over 400 years of age. Tell them about the green-eyed dogfish that may have a gestation period 3 times longer than us as human beings, or the dwarf lantern shark that when it's fully grown is that big. Let's spread the message that these are important, exciting, interesting miracles of evolution, and if we don't act now, then they will be gone, and my children will never have the opportunities that I've had to dive alongside sharks, and that would be a tragedy.
Yes, we must not let that happen on our watch. We really mustn't. And just to make this sort of clear and succinct and nice and simple, so we talked about what can we do as a nation to help protect sharks.
Babbling.
No, that is...
you accuse me of waffling. Not that anyone's ever told me that before.
That is not what I'm saying, Steve. I promise you. But I like a bullet point. I like a nutshell.
2 words, 3 words. Can I do 4?
You could do 4 bullet points.
4 bullet points.
4 issues that we can tackle, that we can lend our voice to. So we've said shark finning. It's an important one. What other ones should we look at?
I think let's look at misrepresentation in the media. So let's shout out whenever the Daily Star, seriously, who is editing the Daily Star? It's the newspaper that hates animals. Anytime the Daily Star has a nonsense feature on the front cover about killer sharks coming to the UK, call them out.
Yes.
Just say, this is nonsense. You shouldn't be allowed to say that. Let's try and bring an end to the misrepresentation of sharks. Let's try and get around the use of unfortunate adjectives and nomenclature when we're talking about sharks. Let's kind of depoison, if that is a word. I just made up a word there.
It's a word.
The narrative. Let's describe them in much less emotive ways, and let's try to make sure that commentators do the same, because it all leads to this public perception of sharks as being malicious man-eating monsters, which we all know isn't true. And then point 2 would be do the opposite. Sell the message about sharks as being awesome, about how important they are to ecosystems. It is difficult to study the precise role that an apex predator plays in an environment, but we all know in ecology that when you take out an apex predator, it has massive bounce-on effects at everything else that lives in the ecosystem that it controls. And that is definitely true of sharks. Three, I think that we need to be ever more aware of the importance, the success, and the hope that can be given by marine protected areas. They work. They absolutely work. Even small ones, if they're strategically planned, can have enormous importance. And no-take zones are huge, not just for conservation, but for fisheries as well. We have such a tiny proportion of our seas. The numbers escape me off the top of my head, how little of British seas are protected. It needs to be more. It has to be more. And that's something, again, that we should be, now that we are out of the EU, we should be driving to do, is protect as much of British seas as we possibly can. And then the fourth thing is activism. I think that there are so many areas of shark conservation that we can all get involved in, whether it is something as simple as signing your name on a petition, or sending a tweet, or making a video about how much you love sharks, or whether it is more than that. I think that we all have a role to play, and we can and must make a difference.
Yes. Thank you. That was very succinct.
It wasn't at all succinct. You said 4 things. I was talking for about 10 minutes.
I can edit. No, it was great. And all these little things that people do, it all adds up. It's all about the collective. It's all about collaborating and working together. It really is. And I know that's said a lot as well. And maybe sort of sound a little cheesy as well, but it is true. Collaboration, working together and uniting to do this, that's the way we're going to make change.
I don't think that's cheesy at all. I think it's completely the way to be thinking about things. And I think particularly being very aware of how we talk to young people and to kids about all areas of wildlife and of conservation, but particularly about sharks. If their first experience is watching Sharknado, or is the front cover of the Daily Star saying "Great white shark coming to terrorise Cornish beaches," then that's going to be their perspective until it is radically changed. If their first experience of sharks is collecting mermaids' purses in the Strand Line when out on a summer holiday, then they're going to have a different perspective.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's really important, and that. Do not underestimate the power of one single young person who is impassioned. I'm lucky enough that I get to work with young people who, have. We talked about earlier on about the fact that we're in bubbles. I'm in a bubble that includes lots and lots of young people who think that they can change the planet. And when you listen to them, you believe them because they have such drive and ambition and passion. They're so lucid. They're so kind of clued in to the ways that they can make a difference. One young person like that has got an awful lot of lifetime to get out and convert other people, and they will do it, particularly now with the power of modern media. So yeah, young people is a critical part of this. Can I add that as my fifth thing?
Absolutely, you can.
And another thing. Don't worry, I'm not going to do.
No, it's good. It's good. Okay, I have some questions from people. A few questions. Talking of young people, the first one is from Arthur Handy, and he wants to know, what is your favourite species of shark and why?
I think it's a tricky one, but I would probably go for the tasseled wobbegong, which is, with its cousin, the ornate wobbegong, one of the most bizarre-looking creatures you'll ever see, or probably won't see, actually, because they're so spectacularly camouflaged. I am lucky enough to have filmed them not only, lying on the bottom looking like a tasseled carpet hidden on the bottom, but also feeding at night as well.
Oh, wow.
Blink of an eye and it's over and done with. But utterly spectacular. And yeah, if I've got to go favourites, that's probably it.
And as a name as well. What a name.
What a name. Yeah.
It's brilliant. Okay, next, from Sean Brostrom. Roughly how many species of shark can be found around the UK? It's more than people would think, isn't it?
The numbers change. I think we are considered to have 21 resident species of sharks, though our deep water species, once you get decent distance away from the edge of the UK, but could still be within British waters, will encompass pretty much every North Atlantic species of sharks. I've got the book on North Atlantic sharks. It's that thick. So, it's an awful lot more than people would expect. And it does include things like threshers, like makos, like poor beagles, like blue sharks, proper sharks. And yet there has never been a recorded attack in British waters. And I would quite confidently say it will be a very long time before we have one, unless someone does something really, really dumb.
Chris Lasso, as a public figure, would you advocate against illegal fishing in marine conservation areas?
Of course. Yeah, of course. As I was intimating before, a good marine conservation area and a good shark sanctuary, like for example Palau, Cocos, the Bahamas, can have a stratospheric effect. And particularly when we're talking about sharks, you focus on shark nurseries and potential shark breeding grounds. The only way they work is if there are no take zones. You can't, create a place where an animal's doing really, really well and go, right, quid in, everyone get in and fish them. You have to. There has to be no take zones. It has to be policed, and that obviously is expensive and difficult. But there are plenty of places around the world where it is working, and when it does, the effects are far faster than you would imagine. One of the challenges that we face in shark conservation is that a lot of the big species of sharks take a long time to reach maturity. It's possible that great whites might take as long as 30 years. Greenland sharks maybe 150 years. So that's an awful long time that you have to protect a shark in order for it to have any chance of reproducing. And yet, many shark sanctuaries that have been set up in the last 20 years are already stuffed with sharks. So, they work, but they have to be policed.
I love that image. Sorry, stuffed with sharks. That is the best image in my head. I love that. But it's so heartening, because we've been primed now to think the time is now, we need to act. There's so many catastrophic things going on, and that is very true. But you need that hope to think we can turn this around, and that's proof. So that is very, very good to know. How do you think we can motivate people that don't get to do these things that you get to do and see the things you get to see? How do we get people to engage with these sorts of issues?
That's a really, really good question. One of the very, very first messages that my first ever boss at National Geographic told me when I started working for him was, know what you're selling. It's very, very simple, but you need to understand who your audience are, how to speak to them, and how things differ. You make a different program when you're going out at 9 p.m. on BBC Two to when you're going out at 11 on BBC Four, or if you're going out prime time on BBC One. Let alone if you start thinking about going out on Discovery or Bravo, if that still exists, or we have to learn as much as we can about our audience. We have to treat them with respect, but also to see them as potential advocates that we have the opportunity to bring to the cause. And I think the more we can do that, the more we have power, and we have real power. And I just think that we need to know that, and we need to use it right.
Oh, well, absolutely. And on that note, Steve, it's people like you that are really helping to get the message out there, spread the shark positivity. And again, just thank you so much for coming on the show to do that and to tell us a little bit more about the causes of some of these sharks and how we can protect them. So, Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.